And we would just travel around the county, just going to the museums, to the parks, to the, like I say, the cemeteries, and then whatever community we went to, they would be the hostess, and then we just usually had a potluck, and we had more fun. Prairie Land something or other, wasn't it?
Prairie Land Tourism. We were the
Prairie
very,
Land Tourism.
we
yeah.
were the very first
Yeah.
tourism organization in the county. So I guess what's going on is going to have to blame on us.
Yeah, and we didn't realize, but we were just having fun, just learning about our county, so real glad Marj could come over. Appreciate it.
Well, as I was thinking about what I was going to talk to you about today, and I kind of think of this as in chronological order, the first thing that comes to mind is this wonderful planet that we live on. And you know, it's 4.5 billion years old. And the other interesting thing about where we live is that we are standing on top of mountains. How many of you had any idea that we're standing on top of the Nemaha Mountains? They are about 160 feet below our feet. The summit of them is over in Nemaha County. And this is the prehistoric time of our country. It's prehistoric because we have no historical record of anything happened in that time. And that's when you get down and you dig into the rocks that's in these mountains, you don't find any fossils. You don't find any evidence of life. And then we go to the next period, which is the Paleozoic period, and we begin to find fossils. And we find them in abundance here because not only are we on top of mountains, at this second period in our Earth's history, we could go swimming in this chalk sea. That was the center of what was in Kansas at that time. There were so many fossils laid down and shells and sand that it covered up the bottom of the ocean. The ocean would dry up and it would fill up. There would be more deposits laid down and it would dry up and fill up. And the climate was very, very warm. And the fossil record tells us that there were lots of warm weather plants and animals. We had fig trees and cinnamon trees and magnolia trees and flying reptiles and three-toed horses and all kinds of interesting things that are no longer with us. 90% of the animals that have been alive in this 4.5 billion aged Earth, 90% of them are gone. So when you think about hearing that, oh my heavens, isn't it terrible? This is disappearing. We're lucky we have 10% left. They've been disappearing for a long, long time. Then we go through these various ages and we get to about 70 million years ago. And about two things happened about the same time. The climate changed. And we became the southern part of the Kansas ice sheet. We're what's known as the dissected till plains of Kansas. And now, the Kansas plains, the prairie in the United States is huge. It's about 400,000 acres of prairie. And in 70 million years ago, when the ice began to cover this part of town, or this part of the country, the glaciers were 2 miles high. And as they melted, they made our lakes, and they made our rivers. And we are at the very edge of the ice sheet. And when you get to the Big Blue River, you don't find the Minnesota granite when you cross over on the other side. You'll find it a little farther south. You get down around Blaine, and off in there you'll find the red granite rocks. But we are at the southernmost part of the ice sheet. And the interesting thing that happened as it melted and things began to change and it began to warm up, man appeared. And along with man, we also got the animals that we are familiar with today. The things that you all think about. We had bison and deer and elk and all these animals, and the little ones that come along, you know, the coons, and saw a badger on the road the other day. All of these little animals came, and they all made trails. And we began to have the first trails in the country were made by animals. And they made trails. They were looking for water, because they had to have water in order to exist. The Indians that came to our part of the country were the Kansas Indians. They were a small tribe. They were Siouan. They were about 3,000 in number. There were a major village about where Leavenworth is today, and that was moved down to the mouth of the Big Blue River. And then here in Marshall County, on Section 7 in Rock Township, there was a large Indian village. And the Indians would trade with other tribes, so that they are going back and forth. And as the Indians traded with one another and as they traveled, they made Indian trails. And one of the interesting things about our county is that we are on the longest Indian trail in the United States. And it goes from St. Louis to the Pacific Ocean. The Indian tribe that was at St. Louis was about as large at the time that Columbus discovered America, would have been about as large as the city of London at the same time. Mm-hmm. And basically what happened to them is that they got to be so big that they exhausted their food supply, their fuel supply, and they just wandered off to other areas, and much as people do today. If you can't have water, you can't have food, you've got to find someplace else to live. The Kansas Indian, this is kind of interesting about them. There are about 120 different ways to spell Kansas. And so what we have come down to today is that we primarily call them the Kansas Indians, or the Kaw. Kansas means people of the south wind. And these were people who sacrificed to their wind god, who was called Wakanda. They cut the heart out of their enemies and sacrificed them to the wind god. The Sundays here, I think perhaps they were aptly named. We seem to have lots of wind. So these people were making trails. And then, of course, we go back, we think about how we got here. And in 1492, of course, Columbus discovered America. Thought he was in India, so we called the natives Indians. And we became a possession of Spain. Okay, so first we're an Indian nation, then we're a Spanish nation. Then along in the 1500s, the French decided that they liked our part of the country, and they began to explore the Mississippi River Valley, and they took possession of it. And where the Spanish had been conquerors and were after gold and silver, the French were after trade. And they established trading forts up and down the river valley, and they traded with the Indians for fur. And this went on until we had the French and Indian War. And after the French and Indian War, then the United States laid claim to all of the territory that was east of the Mississippi River. Well, in 1803, Thomas Jefferson was president, and on the 27th birthday of our country, on the 4th day of July, he announced that he had purchased the Louisiana Territory. And he paid $15 million for this purchase, which figures to about 3 cents an acre. On the same day that he announced his purchase, he called in his good friend Meriwether Lewis, who was a neighbor of his at Monticello. And I always thought, that's such a strange name. How do you name anybody Meriwether? But his mother was a Meriwether, and his father was a Lewis. So he became Meriwether Lewis. And he was very skilled as an outdoorsman. And his mother was a real good herbalist. So he kind of picked up from her about plants and what you could do with them. Jefferson, at that time, had the largest library in the world that consisted of geography, cartography, I'm forgetting, there's several other different things that were of interest to him. And these things became the nucleus of our Library of Congress. But this was an interest of his, and so he knew how to map, and he had the instruments to map. And he took a year and taught Meriwether Lewis how to use the necessary instruments so that he could accurately map. And he was also a botanist, and so he schooled him in botany so that he could identify all the different plants that he would be seeing, because more than anything, he wanted to find out what he bought. And so Lewis was most happy to go out and do this exploration for him, but he wanted a co-captain, and he asked his good friend Clark to go with him. And they picked 29 men to go along, most of whom were soldiers. And they started out to explore the West. One of the interesting bits of history at this particular time is that the general of the army was, I think, I have an awful time remembering this man's name. I think his name was Wilkerson. Anyway, he was a spy, a double agent. He was a spy for Spain. And he sent out 2 groups of men to find Lewis and Clark with the instructions that they were to capture or kill them, but they were to derail their exploration because Spain wanted this territory back. And he reported directly to Madrid for his instructions and what he was supposed to do. Well, as luck would have it, they never found him. And in this wonderful trek west, they only lost one man out of the 29, and that probably was with a ruptured appendix. They went down the Missouri River to the mouth of the Platte, and then from the Platte west. They ran into Frenchmen who had been trapping and bringing in furs. And they got all the way to the Columbia River, but they did not find the pass across the mountains. When they got back, they published detailed maps of the region. So people began to really want to explore, to see what was out here, to see what was going on. And as the Wanderlust took hold of about 1,000 different men, they moved west and they became what we call the mountain men, and they were the fur trappers. And they went into the Rocky Mountains and mostly trapped for beaver. Beaver was the prime pelt for European furs. They made hats out of them. A mountain man by the name of Fitzgerald and Jebediah Smith found the South Pass. And this meant that you had a much easier way to get across the mountains and on over to the Columbia. Before there was a